There are no comparative statistics to show that Muslims suffer more from irrational prejudice than, say, any member of the Hindu, Sikh or Buddhist faiths.
Did you know that during Sadiq Khan's tenure as London mayor, knife crime skyrocketed by 133%? This shocking statistic isn't just a number, it's a stark reality for Londoners living in fear.
In looking to the needs and concerns of all religions and those of no faith.
As Parliament debates hate crimes, a courageous heckler forces the elephant in the room into the spotlight: grooming gangs. But why is this topic so taboo, and what does it reveal about the state of free speech in Britain today? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. The House of Lords, usually a bastion of decorum and measured debate, was about to witness an unexpected disruption. As lords and guests settled into their seats, the air was thick with anticipation. The topic at hand? Muslim hate crime, a sensitive issue that had been simmering in British society for years.
Noble Lord's important points. All forms of racial and religious discrimination are completely unacceptable, and they have no place in our communities. This government will be exploring a more integrated and cohesive approach to tackling it.
As the speech progressed, the tension in the chamber grew palpable. The speaker carefully navigated the delicate subject, balancing concerns about Islamophobia with broader discussions of community safety. But for one man in the public gallery, the carefully crafted words weren't enough. Suddenly, a voice cut through the air, shattering the parliamentary calm. Heads whipped around, searching for the source of the interruption. The Lords, accustomed to orderly proceedings, were visibly taken aback. Some gasped, others frowned in disapproval. The speaker faltered, momentarily lost for words. The heckler's message was brief but explosive. He didn't mince words, directly challenging the narrative being presented. His outburst centered on a topic that had been conspicuously absent from the debate: grooming gang. The reaction was immediate and mixed. Some in the gallery nodded in agreement, while others shook their heads in dismay. But what drove this man to risk ejection and potential legal consequences? The motivations behind such a bold act are complex. Perhaps it was frustration with perceived inaction on the grooming gang issue. Or maybe it was a protest against what some see as an overcautious approach to discussing certain crimes due to fears of stoking racial tensions. The heckler's exact words sent shockwaves through the chamber. What about the grooming gangs? In just 5 words, he had brought a contentious issue to the forefront, forcing it into a debate where it hadn't been invited. What about the grooming gangs? With those 5 words, the heckler ripped open a wound that's been festering in Britain for decades. But here's what most people don't realize. This isn't just about crime statistics or cultural sensitivity. It's about a fundamental challenge to the very fabric of British society. Are we ready to face it? Grooming gangs have become a dark chapter in recent UK history. These organized groups target vulnerable young people, often girls aged 11 to 15, exploiting them for sexual purposes. The scale of the problem is staggering, with thousands of victims identified across the country. But it's not just the crimes themselves that have caused outrage, it's the way they've been handled. The controversy stems from the ethnic makeup of many offenders. Reports have shown that in numerous high-profile cases, perpetrators were predominantly from minority backgrounds, while victims were often white British girls. This has led to heated debates about race, crime, and cultural issues. Some argue that fear of being labeled racist has hindered proper investigation and discussion of these crimes. Take the Rotherham scandal, for example. An official inquiry found that authorities had failed to protect at least 1,400 children over a 16-year period. Why? Partly due to cultural sensitivities and a lack of accountability. It's a pattern that's been repeated in other towns and cities across the UK. The government's response to these scandals has been criticised as inadequate. Despite promises of action, many feel that justice has not been served. Victims and their families have been left feeling betrayed by the very systems meant to protect them. This sense of frustration has boiled over into protests and campaigns demanding accountability. But addressing this issue isn't straightforward. It requires a delicate balance between honest discussions about crime patterns and avoiding the inflaming of racial tensions. Some politicians and officials have found themselves caught between these competing concerns, often resorting to vague statements that satisfy no one. So when that heckler spoke up in the House of Lords, He wasn't just interrupting a speech, he was giving voice to years of pent-up anger and frustration. His outburst forced a topic that many would prefer to avoid into the spotlight. But will it lead to meaningful change, or just more heated debates? That's the question on everyone's minds as we move forward. 5 words. That's all it took to shatter the decorum of the House of Lords and ignite a nationwide controversy. But as the dust settled, a troubling question emerged. In the age of viral outrage, can democracy survive the court of public opinion? The immediate aftermath of the Heckler's interruption was chaos. Security guards rushed to remove the man, while lords and spectators alike buzzed with shock and confusion. Within hours, news of the incident had spread like wildfire across the country. Media outlets scrambled to cover the story, their headlines oscillating between sensationalism and sober analysis. Public reaction was swift and deeply divided. Some hailed the heckler as a brave whistleblower, finally bringing attention to an issue they felt had been swept under the rug. Others condemned his actions as disrespectful and counterproductive, arguing that such outbursts only serve to derail important discussions. Politicians and community leaders found themselves in a difficult position. Many issued carefully worded statements, trying to acknowledge the gravity of the grooming gang issue without condoning the heckler's methods. The incident forced them to confront a topic they'd long avoided, leading to renewed promises of action and accountability. Social media platforms became battlegrounds of heated debate. Hashtags related to the incident trended for days, with users sharing passionate opinions, personal stories, and calls for change. The online discourse highlighted the deep divisions within British society on issues of race, crime, and political correctness. As the conversation evolved, a broader debate emerged about the nature of free speech and respectful discourse in modern democracy. Some argued that the heckler's actions were a necessary disruption of a system that had failed to address crucial issues. Others countered that such behavior undermines the very foundations of parliamentary democracy. The incident undeniably reshaped discussions on grooming gangs. What was once a topic relegated to hushed conversations and fringe political groups suddenly became front-page news. Politicians who had previously skirted the issue found themselves compelled to address it head-on, leading to promises of new investigations and policy reviews. Imagine a parliament where every voice is heard, where even the most difficult conversations can take place without fear or favor. It sounds like a utopian dream, doesn't it? And yet, as we've seen, the alternative, a system that stifles dissent and avoids tough topics, can lead to explosive consequences. So how do we bridge this gap between ideal and reality? Public participation has always been a cornerstone of democracy, but its forms have evolved. From the ancient Athenian assemblies to modern-day town halls, citizens have sought ways to make their voices heard. But what happens when traditional channels seem blocked? History offers us some intriguing examples. Take the suffragettes in early 20th century Britain. These women didn't just politely ask for the right to vote, they chained themselves to railings, smashed windows, and yes, disrupted parliamentary sessions. Their actions were controversial, but they forced a national conversation that ultimately led to change. Fast forward to today, and we're still grappling with how to balance security and openness in government. The recent Heckler incident has reignited this debate. Should we tighten security, potentially limiting public access, or do we risk more disruptions in the name of transparency? Other countries offer interesting perspectives. In the Netherlands, for example, parliamentary debates are often remarkably frank, with politicians addressing sensitive topics head-on. Meanwhile, New Zealand's parliament has incorporated Maori customs and language, acknowledging its multicultural identity. But let's be honest, addressing divisive issues in diverse societies is never easy. It requires a delicate balance of respect, openness, and sometimes uncomfortable truths. The grooming gang controversy highlights this challenge. How do we discuss crime patterns without stigmatizing entire communities? How do we ensure justice for victims while avoiding a backlash against innocent people? These incidents undoubtedly shape our political discourse. They can polarize opinions, but they can also spark genuine dialogue. The key lies in how we respond. Do we retreat into echo chambers, or do we engage with those who disagree? There's no easy solution, but some ideas show promise. Citizens' assemblies, for instance, bring together diverse groups to discuss complex issues. Improved civic education could help people engage more effectively with political processes. And perhaps most importantly, we need leaders willing to have tough conversations, even when it's politically inconvenient. As we wrap up, it's worth asking, what lessons can we learn from this incident? How can we create a democracy that's both robust enough to handle dissent and flexible enough to address emerging challenges?